Hello and welcome back everyone to Stylized Environments with Blender for Geometry Nodes. In the last lesson, we left ourselves off with the top of the roof being slightly deformed, and we ended the lesson there. Now we're going to continue on with these parts over for the section of the framework. We're going to actually grab ourselves the resource pack. We're going to find ourselves this wood over here, and we're going to hit Control C to copy it. Going to go back onto our pack. Onto our course file, we're going to hit Ctrl V to paste it in, and we're going to get ourselves this wood setup. This wood setup is quite nice because if we were to go to shading, we can see how it looks like, and I'm going to go ahead and select it like so. We can see it being used with the normal PBR pack, with the normal PBR materials, and then afterwards, it's actually applying a bit of a lighter edge on the bevels. These bevels are not going to be visible by default, because they're actually being used with the renderer, so it's only going to be visible in a renderer. If we were to go on to render view, it's actually going to be quite dark. The reason being is that we've not set up the lighting. The color that we had on the water looked pretty nice, but here it's not quite there yet. So what we need to do is actually we need to set ourselves up with a bit of lighting. The easiest way to do that is actually going to be throughout using the shader, and the best way that I like to do at the very start is just quickly grab ourselves the sky. And for us to do that, we're going to go from the object mode to the world mode in the shading, like so. Within here, you'll see a basic setup for the background. So that's what's controlling basically the color of the setup. And we can see we can change the color, but we're not going to use that. We're going to go ahead and delete it. Instead, what we're going to use is, if we were to click Shift and A, we're going to search for sky texture. There we go. This is going to be a very nice, very basic type of setup that will allow us to get a quick lighting onto our scene. So now we can actually see what it looks like. And it has a couple of controls for the sun size. For example, if we zoom out, we can see there is a section for where, for example, the sun gradient looks like. We can control that overall. We also have a sun intensity. So if, for example, we see that it's a little bit too intense, we can change that up. But I think by default, can leave it as, I'm going to go ahead and set this to 0.3. I think that's quite all right. Sun elevation is going to be basically how high the sun is. We can control the height of the sun. We actually can see through the shadows over here how it's going to look like. So if we were to increase it to a value of 90, it's going to be right above us basically. So that's how it works. I'm going to go ahead and set this to something like 45 degrees. That usually works, gives us a nice diagonal angle. And the rotation is going to be basically, the 0 is going to be backside, the right side is going to be 90. And if we were to set this to 180, it's going to be right in front of us. And 270, I believe, is going to be to the left of us. The values in between is going to obviously give us the sun to be in the angles in between. So for this particular case, we can set this up to be something like 145. At this particular case, it doesn't really matter. It's only for the preview. And let's go back to quickly to talk about the render engine as well. Again, this is just for a preview, so we're not going to spend too much time on this just yet. We're going to make sure that we are in cycles, and we are going to make sure that the noise threshold is ticked on for both viewport and denoiser. And that's going to give us a much nicer preview overall when it's rendering. It's not going to be as noisy. So now when we zoom in, we can actually see those edgeware pieces over here on the cube. And that's what we're going to get basically with each part of the framework. That's exactly what we want to get. If we were to go back to modeling, we can see that it's not actually going to show us anything in regards to that. So yeah, it doesn't really matter at this point because we only need to apply it. And then based on the angle of the edge, it's going to give us that kind of edgeware. So going back to this, we're going to now actually add in the material. We're going to set ourselves up with the texture. If we look at the reference, we'll notice that this actual wood beam goes all the way to the top of where the roof starts. And the reason for it is because this is a bit more of an open piece. So we need to make sure that it's quite visible. That's basically supporting the main section of the weight, which is going to be the upper section. So I think we'll need to fix that first, and we can actually I'm thinking if we should actually remove this part over here. We're going to leave this part and we can actually just select this. We're going to edit mode. We're going to locate which section we're going to have. So this is the one that we're going to be manipulating basically. We're now going to hit Alt Z, and that way we're going to be able to see through the parts of the mesh. We're going to hit free, which will allow us to select the face. We're just going to select the top of the face. We're going to click 1 and we're going to just click GZ, drag it upwards like so until we reach the triangle spot. And there we go. We got ourselves a nice height. So now we need to think in regards to the mirror modifier itself. If we were to apply the texture right away, which I think we can actually do that, we're going to see that they look identical. So actually, let's go ahead and do that. We're going to go on to material mode. We're going to select wood from here. And we're going to see that right now we do need to fix the wood itself, but all of them, all of the frame look identical. Because it's such an open section, they're going to be quite obviously duplicated, looking like duplicates. So we need to fix that. And for that, we're going to go ahead and go back onto modifiers. We're going to apply the mirror modifier like so. Now we're going to go on to UV editing. We're going to find these poles over here. We're going to hit tab, click A, click U, and now smart UV project. And actually, let's see how this looks like. And by default, it's actually looking quite nice, except for the bottom parts. The smart UV unwrap, by default, it should give us the longest parts going vertically. And that's what we're seeing over here. Ignore the piece on the preview over here for the image. It's going horizontally. The reason being it's actually in the shading. We did end up rotating. If we were to go back onto object, and I will just turn the material back to make it faster, to make it go faster. If we were to check this over here, we did rotate the scale, the UVs over here by 90, which is not going to be visible within the UV preview itself. So this is looking like it's going horizontal, but in reality, you need to imagine that they're going vertically. So that's why it's going to be behaving like that basically. And now we're going to go ahead and select it all. We're going to see how it looks like. All of them look quite nice, except I don't like these pieces over here. Because of the UV, automatic UV projection, the way it behaves is each one of those pieces are based on an angle. So it just detects all those 4 pieces over here as just one piece, and it just cannot rotate anything. So we need to, of course, go ahead and fix that. For us to actually fix that, we're going to go ahead and select it all. We're now going to go ahead and click on this button over here, a very useful button, because once we click it, we can actually deselect it and it's still going to keep us with all the UV space. So before, if we were to deselect it and now click A to select it, once we make a deselection over here on the UV coordinates, it's actually going to just deselect it and it's not going to allow us to make as much of a control basically. So if we have this deselected without this button over here, it's just not going to show all the UV coordinates. So there's that. We're just going to basically select each one of those pieces like so in the square, just like that. You should have something similar, though it's automatic and you should have those kind of squares. We're just going to select each one of those squares over here like so. And yeah, that's quite all right. There we go. All right, we're going to click G and now we're going to be able to move it outwards. We're going to click R and then 90 and just put it back. It doesn't matter if it's overlapping for this particular case because we're not baking anything. We're not applying any of the other textures for like video games or anything of the sort. It's okay to just overlay them like so. And now we can see that this is actually, is this right? I think, yeah, it is right. There we go. So we can see that this wood piece now is going in the way that we want it to, which is great. And if we zoom in, we can see that the beveling is now actually being affected. The reason being is that we've not applied the beveling. But for this particular case, when we have small bevels, it's actually quite okay to just make use out of them as is. It simplifies our process because we don't have as much topology to work with. So now we can go on to render view to see how it looks like. And that's the result we're going to get. So nicely set up the edge wear and whatnot. All is good. And yeah, we're pretty much done with the main structure, with the main wood. Now we're going to continue on moving on to the upper section over here. We're going to continue doing this in the next lesson though. So Thank you so much for watching, and I will be seeing you in a bit.